Good morning, evening, or afternoon, YouTube, and welcome back to PSP, aka Pawn Shop Pistols, the only YouTube channel where every firearm I review is purchased from a pawn shop. Today, we're taking a look at the Haskell JS45. Now, some of you might be thinking to yourself, hey, that looks an awful lot like a Hi-Point JH45. Well, you'd be correct. Haskell was eventually purchased by Hi-Point, and they used the bones of this handgun as the basis for their JH45. A gentleman by the name of Ed Sellard was friends with a man named Russ Hill of Haskell Manufacturing, who made the 45 calibers for the Hi-Point brand. This 45 here was the first model that Haskell manufactured. It's believed to be named after Ed Stellard's wife, Josie Stellard, hence the JS designation. Later, the frame of the firearm continued to evolve under the Hi-Point banner after Hi-Point purchased Haskell, eventually culminating in the JH45, the JH standing for Jesse Hill, Russ Hill's oldest son. We have this interesting piece of history to thank for the affordable 45 Hi-Points on the market today. These firearms were produced from around 1991 to 2002. Let's take a closer look at it. So, this is the Haskell JS45. Definitely an interesting firearm. I'm excited to take a closer look at it today. But before we get too far into this, what's the first thing we need to do when handling a firearm? That's right, make sure it's safe to handle. So the first thing we're going to do, pop the magazine out with the heel release here. That's empty. Now we're going to check the slide. Okay, nothing in there. We're all set. So some of you might be asking why I put the Terminator in the thumbnail, and why is this humanity's best hope against the machines? Well, this firearm here is part of cinematic history, as was confirmed by the prop department of Terminator 2 to be John Connor's personal sidearm. Now, you never see the sidearm itself, but supposedly here in this picture that I'm going to overlay, in this screenshot from the Future War opening scene, this 45 is holstered right here. And if you need more evidence, here's a screenshot that's taken from an early 2000s DVD Ultimate Release of T2. And they spell Haskell wrong, but it says, in regards to the weaponry used by the humans, on the human side of the battle, Ruger AC 5.56s with muzzle light shells, LS 45 laser sighting devices, that's this firearm, this is the LS 45, and mounted monitors were used by the resistance soldiers, along with a SPAS 15 semi or pump-action shotgun, a Haskell, misspelled there with two S's, 45 handgun holstered by the adult John Connor, and the ubiquitous GE minigun mounted as an anti-aircraft unit. Now, I picked this one up for $130, and kind of a funny story here. The pawn shop didn't even know what it was. The sales rep had never even heard of Haskell before and thought that someone had just kind of engraved their name on the slide here. I had to wait a few days to speak to a manager about it, but once they got back and gave me a call, I was able to do some research and haggle a little on the price. They had originally wanted $200 for it, but after calling Hi-Point and discovering that they don't warranty these anymore, I was able to convince the manager to go down to $130. They weren't even sure quite how long it had been behind the glass for because it had came from one of their other pawn shops of the same name. So they didn't have all of the history on the firearm. So that being said, is this a firearm worthy of the leader of the resistance in the war against the machines? Let's find out. This firearm is a single-action internal hammer design. Steel frame, and I mean solid steel frame. This thing is heavy. 39 ounces, or about 2.5 pounds. If you find that whatever you're shooting at can take all 7 of the 45 rounds that go in the magazine here and keep moving, you can always use the firearm itself as a weapon. Now we got a standard 4.5-inch barrel in here, manual thumb safety located right here, 7-round magazine which releases from the heel release, fixed sights, no adjusted sights available for windage. You've just got to aim this the old-fashioned way. copolymer grip, which just means it's made a little differently than your standard polymer grip. Feels good to hold, but heavy, bulky. I mean, I have really big hands, so this feels really, really good in my hand. It feels really solid. Safety with this thing is bare minimum, though. Only the thumb safety is present. There is no magazine safety, and the firearm has no last round hold open when you fire the last round, meaning that you need to be extra careful when you count your rounds correctly, since the only way to know if the chamber is clear is to check it yourself after the 7th round. So, the guts. How do we get this thing apart? Well, let's check it out. If you're familiar at all with how a high point comes apart, you'll recognize this immediately. So you'll notice in the slide here, there's a second notch right here. So we have the safety that goes here, this notch here. This is meant to slide back and hold open. And if you can see it, this little tiny pin right here, that's what is holding the slide onto the frame. So we're going to get this out. So I've got my trusty punch and a nice rubber mallet here. Now, when I fiddled around with this earlier, just to kind of get a feel for it, this thing does not like to come apart, and it does not like to go back together either. These machined parts, you know, they're old. They're catching on each other, and they can just really be a pain to work with. So I'm going to do my best here to make this a nice and fluid process, but keep that in mind when purchasing one of these, that they can be a little tough to get a hang of. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and mute this while I knock this punch out. Now, you may have seen after that first hit, the lock doesn't exactly work very well here. It immediately slid forward. So be careful not to pinch yourself on these when you're knocking this pin out. Let's see, I think I might have to do a couple more hits here. There we go. So don't lose this. This is going to be very, very important for keeping the gun held together. I'm going to pull this out. Set that aside. All right. Now, in theory, this comes apart very, very easily. We pull the slide back, lift up, and pull forward. Oh, all right. Wish me luck. So this one, it just keeps getting stuck on the barrel. Really gotta pull on this thing. Oh, there we go. So, a little spring went flying there. This holds this together just like this. So we'll set that aside. All right. So, now that we have this apart, let's go ahead and take a look at this thing. So we've got our recoil spring right here. We have the slide retainer pin there. All right, now, this holds the slide onto the barrel. You can see this hole right here. This is what the pin goes through in order to hold the slide onto the frame. So it sits in here just like this. So it can be a little hard putting this back together to make sure that this all lines up perfectly. Because if you put it in this way, obviously the pin isn't going to want to go in. So you have to make sure that you line it up when you reassemble the firearm. But it also serves a second purpose, and it holds the firing pin spring. Maybe. There we go. The firing pin spring here, as well as the firing pin itself. Now, typically, when you're going to clean this, this is really as far as you want to take it down. We can take the barrel off. These two little holes right here, you just put the punch in here, knock out these little pins, and the barrel pops right off. I might fiddle around with that later just to see if I can get a smoother release on the slide. But just with this style of firearm here, this brand Haskell, it might just be part of the process of taking it off is to just put in a little grunt work. Now you can see the safeties here, bare minimum. I mean, this is how the safety works on this, right? So when you pull the trigger, you can see the sear right here moves down. All the safety does when you flick this up is block that from going down. Whoop. You got to be very careful with this. Now, it's easy enough to take the grips off. On my model, this is just a Phillips head screwdriver. So it's easy enough to take the grips off if you need to reset this for any reason. If it falls out, you're just kind of messing around a little. Maybe you get your finger caught up in here and it just kind of pops right out and you can't seem to slide it back in. Now that we have everything apart, let's just go ahead and do a visual inspection. We're going to look for anything out of the ordinary. Cracks, warping, chips, anything like that. A little scoring here, but that's to be expected. Another thing I should mention on this model here, this part of the barrel is made out of aluminum. Now, why is that important? Aluminum warps under pressure and heat. So when you have especially a larger caliber like this 45 here, and you got the bullets going through here, just be sure to double check this because this can get warped and even crack under certain circumstances. So there are still part kits available online that people sell for these. Some of them go for about $150. I've seen some of them as high as $300. So just be sure that if you find one of these and you really want it for your collection, check this part of the barrel. Make sure that there are no cracks or everything just looks good here. You can see the rifling inside the barrel there. That looks good. Let's move on to the slide here. Very, very bare bones, as you can see. Very simple design. You know, it was meant to be the original high point. You know, it was meant to be affordable firearms for the everyday person. And that's what they had in mind when they designed this. Oh, my fingers are getting a little crummy here from all this old oil. Springs feel okay. I don't feel too bad. Take a look at the firing pin here. No cracks, no warps that I can see. Everything feels nice and smooth. All right. And the magazine itself. Now, if you'll recall in my previous video, my Zastava, I made sure to double check on this firearm that the magazine cannot just be pulled out with your fingers. So I know this, if it does malfunction at the range, it's not going to be like that. Okay, let's go ahead and try and get everything put back together. Now, this can be a little tricky. I actually had to use my mallet earlier in order to reassemble it, just because it just did not want to cooperate. So we're going to reverse the steps in order to put this back together. So we're going to take the firing pin, slide that into the slide first. But take the spring, slide that in next. All right. Now we already have the spring replaced back here. You're going to want to use this sharp piece here. That's going to go through the front of the spring like this. All right. Now, yep, this is the part. It just doesn't want to go back down. Well, even though that came out, luckily we can just slide them back in. So here's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to take my mallet and I'm going to tap the top of the slide to try to get it over whatever it's catching on. So I'm going to take my mallet here. There we go. It's unfortunate that I have to do that because it really is simple to take apart and put back together. These parts are just so tightly fit that they do not move smoothly over each other. And I am wondering if that's going to be a problem down at the range. So we're going to put the firing pin back there, as well as the spring. Okay, now this is the tricky part. We need this to line up with the hole just like that. So we need it to go in like this so it lines up properly. So I'm going to slide this in to the back of the slide. Make sure that's nice and even there. And we're going to pull the slide back, and we're going to drop this. There's this tiny hole right here. We're going to do our best to line this up and then slop it in there and rack it. So let's see if we can do it. Let's see if we can make it happen. All right, well, we got that in there. Is it lined up properly? I cannot see any light through that hole. So that means we got to take it back apart here and rotate this. It's an easy process, but it's a monotonous one. It can get quite annoying working with this thing. There we go. Okay, let's take a look now. Oh, does not want to hold open here. No, still not. All right, I'm going to cut here, get this situated, and then get the pin back in. But you can see how if you're doing this out in the field or out in the range, this could really, really be a pain if you have some sort of malfunction or you've got to take the slide off for some reason. This can be really, really annoying to do. So I'm going to cut, get this angled, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so that took me about 10 minutes to rotate that stupid thing to get it lined back up here. But you can see now, you can finally see through that hole there. So we're going to take our pin, place that in the hole. I'm going to mute this part here, but we're going to hammer this back. Now, remember, this is going to slide down as soon as I hammer on this. So try not to pinch your fingers. Now, when it goes all the way through, the slide's going to snap back forward by itself. So at least you know it's flush. All right, that was a little complicated. Let's go ahead and do a function check here. All right, safety still seems to work. All right, that feels good. Okay, let's take this giant brick to the firing range and see how it does. Today's range ammo is from two separate manufacturers. We have a 230 grain Federal American Eagle in the red box and a 155 grain Speer Lawman in the green box. I'll be shooting 4 targets today, alternating between the Lawman and the Federal, to see if there's any noticeable difference or malfunctions while firing. All targets will be at 7 yards. All right, here we go. Well, this gun had a few surprises for us today at the range. I'm very surprised that the malfunctions happened with the higher grain Federal here. If any malfunctions were going to happen, I thought for sure that it would have been from the 155 grain Lawman here. I'm really, really surprised about that. Guys, this might be the most fun I've ever had shooting a firearm. Seriously. I put a few more rounds through the firearm usually after I'm done filming, just to get a better feel for it. Just a couple more magazines for this part of the video. And for this gun, I have never taken a gun to a range where I left with no ammo left in my boxes. It was just so much fun to shoot. So I went through both boxes here, and at 7 rounds per magazine, it means I got 7 magazines worth of ammo per box. Every single one of the Federal magazines had the same failure. 7 out of 7 magazines had the failure to feed. Now, it wasn't always on the 3rd or 4th round, but it did fail 100% of the time with the Federal. The Lawman here, not a single malfunction. Not one. I'm very, very surprised. Also, the kickback, virtually non-existent. It feels like shooting a 9mm. So the firearm might weigh a ton, but it makes recoil extremely easy to manage. I'd say as long as John Connor didn't use Federal ammo, I'm sure it would be quite the reliable sidearm to have in the war for the future. So much fun, guys. Add this to your collection if you get the chance. Now, would I recommend this for people looking to buy a 45 for the first time? It's hard to say. It's a little difficult to take apart and put back together. Functionally, it's great, but consider the difficulty of cleaning it if you aren't comfortable banging on a gun a little bit. Using extra tools like a mallet to get a slide to go back on or come off. And maybe not all Haskells are like mine, so just be sure to inspect yours before you buy it, if you can find one. So that being said, there's 3 things that are important to me when purchasing a firearm: price, performance, and condition. Price. $130 for a functional 45? 5 out of 5, easily. Very affordable. Performance. Well, it had a 100% malfunction rate on the Federal 230 grain, but then it had a 100% success rate on the Lawman 155. What if Federal was the only ammunition you could find? I have to rate it 3 out of 5. I'll definitely clean it and shoot it at the range again. Maybe the Federal not working was just a one-off, but failing 7 out of 7 magazines isn't promising. I'd like to test more ammo brands on this in the future. The condition. Well, it sucks to take apart, and it sucks to put back together. Functionally, the firearm is 5 out of 5, but taking it apart to clean will definitely make some people uncomfortable. I'd have to rate it 3 out of 5 here. It doesn't have many steps to disassemble, but performing those steps, at least on mine, takes quite a bit of grunt work. Overall, while this may lack some of the refinement of a big brand like a SIG or a Springfield, the Haskell is fun to shoot, and if you find the right ammo for it, it won't let you down. I see why it's John Connor's sidearm of choice. This has been PSP. Thanks for watching. See you next time.